This 1965 Chevy Impala with 14 miles has sold twice at auction in the last 7 years. Once for $27,500 and once for $76,150. We're going to be talking about those results specifically and what that means to you when you're considering who to hire for an auction company. Today, Behind the Gavel with Jason, we'll be talking about that very topic. Why is it important to choose the right auction company and what you should be looking for when you're doing that? So this came about, we've talked about this before in different ways, but this is such a clear definition or illustration of what we're talking about. We're talking about using the right auctioneer and auction fever, and that is a real thing. So this 65 Chevy Impala sold in 2013 at the Vanderbrink Chevrolet auction in Nebraska by a colleague of mine, Vanderbrink Auctions. Vanderbrink owns it. Vanderbrink Auctions are based out of Minnesota. They've done auctions in, I think, 19 states. Has been in the auction business since 2001. Does a really, really good job. And her company was contracted to sell the Vanderbrink Chevrolet dealership auction in 2003. And they received huge media attention for it because the owner of that collection owned the Vanderbrink Chevrolet dealership. And when a car didn't sell or if he liked it, he just put it back and never did anything with it. So this car was from the original dealership with the original paperwork with 14 miles on the odometer. I believe it was 14 miles. Yeah, 14 miles on the odometer. They had cars with 1 mile and 4 miles and things like that. But I'm talking about this one today because it was just recently sold again at Mecum Auctions in Kissimmee, Florida. Mecum Auctions, all they do, collector car auctions and motorcycles and related. They do some signs and Petrolina, things like that. They are the largest collector car auction company in the world. They sell the most lots. They sell over 20,000 lots a year. They have an auction every month in different venues across the country. They have the most auction venues of any car company. They have the largest collector car auction every year in Kissimmee, Florida, which just occurred this week. It's still going on right now. We'll continue through this weekend. And they also have the largest motorcycle auction in the world in Las Vegas every year. So they're an extremely established, well-known and respected car auction company. You've probably seen them on TV. I've met a lot of the guys and women who work for them. I know Yvette through Facebook and other platforms that we've discussed things on. I have nothing but positive things to say about both companies. I'm not going to slam either one. We're just talking about results on a very specific lot that has sold. So 7 years ago, when Yvette sold this collection, she had incredible media coverage. She was covered in probably dozens of auto-related magazines, TV shows, podcasts, web shows, all you could imagine. It was covered everywhere. It was covered by the History Channel, I believe. There was news crews there before, during, and after the event. She received press and publicity for it. And because of that, the turnout was insane. This is, billed as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and to my knowledge, it has been and still is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to buy essentially brand new vehicles that have been sitting for 40, 50, 60 years with next to no miles on them. These are really museum kind of cars, and nobody's going to buy these cars. I can't imagine somebody buying a car with 14 miles on it to drive around at a car show. They weren't in car show quality. They really were sitting. So they had, the original paint was still on them. They were sitting in barns and garages for years. Some of the inventory was sitting outside, so it had been, damaged through that. But they're really incredibly rare in that there's how many cars from the 60s exist with less than 20 miles on them. The estimates of attendance at that auction were between 15 and 25,000 people, depending upon who you talk to. Media reports said 15,000. The sheriff's department estimated upwards of 25,000 people were there. Regardless, that's a lot of number. Even if you take the low number, 15,000 people at an auction event is kind of crazy. There's absolutely no way all those people could bid, but they weren't there to bid. They were there to see it. I thought about going up there, but I didn't want to fight the crowds. I knew it'd be crazy, insane, and nothing was going to be bought. They sold yardsticks, wooden yardsticks for $600 and hubcaps for $1,200, not because they were worth it, but because people wanted a piece of that auction of that history, of that story, because the story was so compelling, which is part of what we're talking about today. So when Yvette sold that car, it brought $76,150. When Mecum sold that car just 2 days ago, it brought $27,500. Internationally known auction company versus a essentially local mom and pop auction company. And Yvette's bigger than mom and pop, but you understand they're different. Mecum has 200 employees on auction day. You know, Yvette probably has 20 or 25, maybe 30 in an event like that. So you understand the difference in the scopes of their business, and their businesses are different. They're not supposed to be the same. But in this instance, Yvette's results completely smashed Mecum's because of that passion, that auction fever, that opportunity cost that we talk about a lot in the auction business. The idea of a buyer buying a piece from that auction on that day could never be replicated. The objects sold for far more than they were worth to a car person, because there was the car people and history people there. And they didn't care what it cost. They just wanted a piece of it. They wanted a car from there. A lot of the people, when the event was cleaning up the store rooms, people would stop and talk to her about how they've been waiting for 30, 40, 50 years to see these vehicles and have the opportunity to buy them. And so there was a huge pent-up demand for these specific cars from this specific location at this specific time. When you remove items from that conversation, they become a car. It's still a cool car. It's still a wonderful car, but it's a $15,000, $20,000 car on a good day, on a regular day at auction. It still brought a premium over what it's worth at $27,500. It's, a car, that car, books out at $15,000, $20,000. It's still brought a premium because it is unique, but it didn't bring the premium that it did because of the day of event. And so when you're thinking about selling your parents' estate or collection, when you're thinking about who do I hire? It's not about the size of the company. It's about how well they do their job. It's also about how do they present the objects. We talk a lot about creating a story for our sellers when they're selling a collection. And the more objects we have from a collection, the easier that story is to tell, and the more impactful that story is. So if you have a collection of whether it's jewelry or silver or art or cars or real estate, even whatever your asset class is, oftentimes you'll do much better if you choose a good company. You'll do much better selling everything at one time, because it creates and incites a passion and a curiosity and a desire to have something from that specific collection at that specific time. Everybody who collects anything brings their own aesthetic to it, no matter what you collect. If it's pottery, if it's Asian art, if it's contemporary art, you collect things differently than people who collect the same thing, because you have different space options, you have different financial options, you have different historical backgrounds, you might have inherited pieces that influence your parents. Obviously our children are exposed to museums and art on a daily basis. One of our children loves that, one of our children hates that. But I was rarely in a museum as a child unless it was a school trip. My parents, it was not something that was important to them. And so I have a completely different approach and introduction to art than other people of my same age and generation, and my children are much the same way. They have friends who will love art and do love art, but they're not exposed to it at the same age in the same way as they are. And so every collection has its own aesthetic, it has its own personality, it has its own appeal. And the more of a collection you can present at one time, the more impactful that story and appeal and desire of buyers to purchase becomes. When we've sold the Hood estate or the Cultus estate, we sold objects for far more than they were worth at regular auctions because of where they came from. The sensibility of the collector influenced the buyers because they felt like the objects were all a different class or better quality because of the cumulative effects of the collection. Not to say that there aren't deals in every auction, not to say that there weren't pieces that sold for good prices, for a buyer standpoint, but a lot of pieces sold for more there than they will sell in other venues later. We see it regularly. We've been fortunate in that we've been in business for about 13 or 14 years now. We have sold many pieces multiple times. And it's really interesting to see how well or how poorly things do the second, third, fourth time. I think we've sold one object 5 times, to see how the origination affects the output in the original time and the secondary times. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, right? When we had single objects, like we have a great piece of Chinese art in an auction, but no other Asian artifacts, it might sell for a good but not great price. We've had sellers buy something like that, hold it for a few years, and when we have other great Asian pieces, they'll slide it in there and they'll make some money on it. So you have to be, don't want to say smarter than the auction, but you have to really be cognizant of what they're selling, who the other buyers might be, and really think about that in a long-term aspect. If you're thinking about buying for resale or buying as a collector, but if you're thinking about it as a seller, absolutely. If you have a collection, more often than not, it makes sense to do it as a big collection. It might be a series of auctions, it might be multiple auctions, but having that series, that collection, that one brand that the seller, the auctioneer can create that story for can make a huge difference in your results. Thank you all so much for watching Behind the Gavel with Jason today. We do this every Friday at 11:45 Central Time here on YouTube, on Facebook Live. We address a different topic in regards to auctions, antiques, estate items, and look for your input on that as well. Thanks for watching, Ben, Robert, and everybody else who watched. Getting ready to wrap this up. If you have any questions you'd like us to discuss, go ahead and post them here. Send us a direct message. If you're watching us on YouTube or LinkedIn, go ahead and post in the comments. If you have questions about today's conversation, please post those as well. We address those as regularly as we can. If you have questions you want to talk to us about privately, you can always send us a direct message on most of those platforms, or you can send us an email at info@kcauctioncompany.com, info@ K, letter C, auction company spelled out.com. You can give us a phone call at 816-283-3633, 816-283-3633. It's going to be a crazy weekend here in Kansas City. We have a wild storm rolling in. It's going to be rain, then freezing rain, sleet, then snow tomorrow. Sunday, the Chiefs play the Houston Texans here in the division round of the NFL playoffs. Obviously, here in Kansas City, we're hoping for a Chiefs victory. And, of course, we're all back to school now, back into the regular routine of school and business. So it's a good time of year to get back in the routine of things. And a lot of people have resolutions that they're probably still holding on to. We'll see how long those last for folks. So thanks all for watching. If you have any questions, let us know, and we'll see you next Friday.